Hello, and welcome to this interview for Creative Renaissance. Reignite your creativity, reclaim your vitality, and overcome any adversity. This series is for people who feel disconnected from life and a sense of purpose, people who are discouraged from freeing their true potential. We aim to help them reconnect with their innate creative genius already within them. And with me today, I'm so happy. I'm joined by Christopher Lee Maher, who is a former Navy SEAL and the creator of True Body Intelligence. He's also an author, inventor, entrepreneur, speaker, coach, and innovator in the fields of health, wellness, and longevity. Christopher, thank you so much for being with me today.
Thank you. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm
let's
so happy
serve
that we
and
can
give
talk.
everyone an opportunity to push beyond their limitations.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would love to know, just to start, how did you arrive at the work that you're doing? Your background is so incredibly varied, and so I'd love to know, like, what brought you to what you're doing now?
I mean, the simple answer is pain, right? And I think, was I the type of person that was going to wake up in the morning excited to change the world? No. I was the type of person that was excited to get in the world and have adventures for myself. And I ran into some pain in my body. And then I started to lose my sense organs started to lose their function. So I started to have hearing issues, vision issues, um, insomnia, states of depression. Um, I would say emotional disconnection. And yet the challenge was on the outside, I looked great. And yet inside, it's like a car that has like a great paint job, but then you look underneath the hood or you get in, you sit in the driver's seat and you go to turn the car on and the motor doesn't work correctly. And I was that person. And yet I was still pushing forward as if everything was okay. And so when you're a Navy SEAL and you go through the kind of training that I went through, it becomes very easy to ignore discomfort because you have a mission and a vision and a purpose in your mind. And you have the ability to lean on the experience of pushing through difficult things. And I think my gift of pushing through difficult things eventually became a curse.
Yeah.
And it started working against me. And so that limiting belief and that limiting strategy caused me to move from having structural issues, which would be any kind of pain in your body, right? Ankle, toes, fingers, knees, hips, wrists, shoulders, back, neck. Okay. And then, once you shift into or you shift out of structural issues into sense organ problems, right? Hearing, smell, taste, touch, then my challenges were going much deeper into my body.
Mm.
And so at some point, I had to do something which was really vulnerable, which was to connect to someone else and let them know that I was in pain instead of continuing to push through it because I got in a car accident and the pain drove into the left side of the center point of my left hip and it was throbbing constantly. So there was nothing that I knew that I could do to get away from it. And so I did the most vulnerable thing in my life at that point, which was to let someone else in on my pain because I grew up in a household where no one talked about pain. No one talked about discomfort. People just sort of numbed out. You know, almost all of my aunts and uncles and my grandmother and my mom, they were drinkers, they were smokers. And as I look over the history of my life, I realize that culturally, the most common thing to do was to numb out from discomfort. And so I was, I chose a different strategy, which was the idea of, well, suck it up, keep moving forward. If it gets worse, push harder.
Mm.
And that worked against me. And it led me to where I'm at today. So reaching out to one person who led me to another person, who led me to another person, who led me to another person, eventually led to a place where there was no longer any pain in my body. The function of my sense organs had returned, so my vision returned, my hearing returned, my sleep returned, and I was able to take desperation and turn it into a vocation. And the
Ah,
desperation I had, which was to build a new strategy for complex stress that I was living with from my childhood and from SEAL training and from training for what I considered at the time an Olympic dream to be able to get to the Olympic trials. And as I look back, I'd say maybe I was fooling myself, right?
mm.
I had the drive, but I no longer had the body because my body was full of so much stress. And that caused me to disconnect from myself. I was disconnecting from my own pain.
Right. Wow. Wow. Thank you for sharing all of that. It's such a, I think it's a very resonant sort of story for a lot of people because we're all trained very, you know, this culture is really pushing us. We're always being taught that we have to push harder, push past, like ignore the pain, ignore the discomfort, numb it out, just keep going, right? And of course, I mean, in different degrees for different people, and certainly, being trained, any kind of military training, any kind of like intense athletic training, um, will be even more so in that regard, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And eventually there's a cost. Like you're going to have to pay the piper someday, meaning what you put in, if you let it stay in and you refuse to take it out, it's eventually going to lead to some state of dis-ease emotionally, psychologically, energetically, structurally, or disease physiologically.
Mhm.
And, it takes a lot of courage to be able to interrupt a pattern
Yeah.
that you've grown used to. It's familiar. Like, Americans and being raised in the US, I'm happy I was raised in the US, but I like to look at the Olympics because the US, guess what? We go to the Olympics and we're really good performers. But we never talk about the cost associated with being a really good performer.
Yeah.
Like if you look at, you know, professional athletes or uh, musical performers, and a lot of times what do they struggle from? They struggle from high levels of depression. They struggle from high levels of physical pain, and they suffer from high levels of depression. If you just even study comedians and you begin to listen to like personal interviews, they'll even inform you and tell you that at some point they suffered from depression and they had an opportunity to get out of it, but it's such a familiar place they thought, well, if I leave my depression, then I'll no longer be funny,
Yeah.
right? And so I think that once I got used to that that kind of drive, it became sort of like a drug, or maybe more like an addictive pattern
Mm.
that I had no idea was causing me to separate from myself. Because I think, the more you numb out from your body, the more you numb out from your mind. The more you numb out from your mind, the more you numb out from your emotions. The more you numb out from your emotions, the more you numb out from the energetic cost of everything that you're doing. And then eventually, your what I would call your mean state of health starts to decrease. But because it's decreased to such a level that you become familiar with, you no longer remember what it used to feel like when you felt good. You
Mhm.
felt consistently fresh, like my energy's good, my mind is quiet, my emotions are grounded, and I'm highly energized.
Yeah.
And it's who's courageous enough to do that, right? And I think we're at a point in time because of people like you who are setting up events like this one and people like me who are willing to share their stories. We're finally at a time in society where people are going, oh, maybe there is another way. Maybe life balance and professional balance and emotional balance are a better way to go about things.
Yeah, yeah. And maybe also I think you're actually leading to my next question, which is how do you feel that this, your work and your transformation for yourself and also what you do with other people, how it relates to this theme of this event, which is creative renaissance?
Well, I mean, the thing for me that I love about it is this whole process has allowed me to be creative in a way that I had never seen before when it came to personal development, when it came to healing, when it came to personal growth. And this has allowed me to create systems that help anyone and everyone who's suffering from any state of dis-ease to find a new centered place,
Mm.
to be able to reawaken balance in their lives, physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually, energetically. So, um,
Yeah.
the creative process, when someone comes in and they're sitting with you and they're telling you that they're suffering in some way, you can have some rote delivery system that's generalized for everyone, or you can sit down and meet the person where they're at and figure out what would actually work for them. And I love the creative process because I feel like it allows me to co-create with the divine, whatever people call it, whether they call it source, whether they call it consciousness, whether they call it God. It allows me to be a co-creator with this person. Because I always feel like whatever challenges or problems that someone's bringing to me, they're half of the co-creative process. Because without them, I stop learning. And so I love when people show up with complex problems that require complex creativity skills
Right.
at an emotional level, at an energetic level, at a psychological level, at a structural level, at a physiological level. And that for me is like now is the most fun part because then I get to take all that information and I get to jot it down and then share it with the people that want to learn and do the things that I'm doing in the world. And so the creative process of helping one individual turns into helping thousands of individuals.
Yeah. Yeah, wonderful. I'd like to just underline a couple things that you mentioned earlier, like these points of that are so key, not only to your own healing, but also the healing work that you're doing with your clients, is that the piece of vulnerability,
Yeah,
so important, and courage.
yeah,
Both of these are essential, right, for
yeah.
this healing and for creativity. I think creativity actually and healing are really intertwined.
1000%. Like I think the peak of creativity is healing, right? Like you find the greatest healers in the world and they're the most creative. They're the most connected to their emotional source. And when you can create something that allows someone to penetrate through a place in their life that was insurmountable, and they get to experience freedom or hope or passion, um, or sense of intimacy and grace again in life, I think that's the ultimate expression of creativity. And
Yeah.
sometimes that's a picture for someone, sometimes a photo, sometimes a painting, sometimes a sculpture, sometimes it's a song, right? Whatever creative whatever love went into that creative effort has the potential to create change for someone.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of times when we're going through the things that we're going through, or we're creating the things that we're creating, we have no idea who it's for. But when we're in that state of love for ourselves and love for the process of life, we then get to co create at a much higher level, at a very conscious level. And if we can let go of the sense of I'm creating for this end result, as opposed to I'm creating simply for the experience of creation, because I feel like that's the greatest compliment that you can give to whoever's responsible for creating any aspect of our lives that we're involved in.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would go further actually and say that creating, I mean, creation isn't just a product, it's a process.
Yeah,
It is not just something that is like measurable or monetizable or like I mean that's all great, but it's really it's ongoing process within us, within each of us, and also between us.
yeah. I
And
mean, if you look at creativity simply as like, what are you going to create to eat tonight? Like, what are you going to create as like a wholesome meal for what your body needs after a long day of work, right? What are you going to create as a conversation at the table for your children after they've had a long day at school to be able to get to know them more? What are you going to create for this presentation for the job that you're at that you're really passionate about? Like for me, everything is a process of co creation. And I think the term that I love most in the world is co creation because I feel like it's something that we do together, whether it's the artist with the canvas and the oil and the paintbrush, or if it's the musician with the violin, um, if it's the carpenter with the hammer and the nail and the wood, if it's if it's the bricklayer with the concrete and the bricks, like everyone is creating, right? And I think probably part of the conversation that I feel is really important is where are you creating from, right? Are you creating from loss? Because when people create from loss, they create songs that are very emotional, right? Are you creating from joy? People who create music from joy, it's very uplifting. It motivates, it inspires. Am I creating from fear? Right? Because if I'm creating from fear, I'm creating more pain in the world, right? Am I
yeah.
creating from anxiety? If I'm creating from anxiety, I'm creating, more shadow. And so I think part of the conversation for everyone who's listening is where are you creating from? And then why are you creating from that place? And if you
Yeah.
can stop and go, wow, I really am creating from anger, you can go, oh, today is creating from anger going to be beneficial or harmful? And if you come to the place of understanding that's going to be harmful, and you're really honest and vulnerable with yourself, which is the world that you brought up earlier, in that state of vulnerability, you now have the potential to change the place where you create from, right? And if we
Mm.
look at upsides and downsides, well, the downsides would be anxiety, anger, frustration, agitation, fear, and self righteousness. And so we all have relationships, right? We have relationships with what we would consider inanimate objects as what we would call like a classical artist, a writer, a sculptor, a painter, a musician. But then we have a teacher, right? And let's say a teacher is in the classroom today and they're teaching from frustration. Well, when we teach from frustration, we'll only propagate more frustration and
Right.
confusion in the field. And so I think it's really important to assess that day where you're creating from and then be able to interfere with that pattern. Maybe you call someone, maybe you text someone, maybe you write, something down to yourself and you just let someone know what you're suffering from that day. So that's no longer part of you. Like if you woke up angry, well, just lean over and tell your partner, tell your children, wow, I'm really frustrated today. I really don't want to go to work because my back really hurts. And then in that state of honesty, in that state of vulnerability, they then get to offer you an opportunity to create a new pattern that day. And maybe your son says, well, Dad, if your back hurts, why don't you go to the chiropractor today? When's the last time you went? Oh, I haven't been in 4 months. Okay, well, why don't you just like text your boss and tell him, you might be an hour late, but you're willing to work an hour later, but you're dealing with some back pain today. And otherwise, he keeps it to himself. He goes to work. He suffers through the discomfort that's unnecessary because he's unwilling to invite somebody into his story to help co create a new thing. So when he goes to the chiropractor, he's co creating a new reality, a pattern interrupt for the process of his life. So when he goes home to dinner at night, guess what happens? He has a nice dinner when he sits down with his family instead of one of agitation and irritation. Instead of having 5 beers, he only has one. Instead of having 3 glasses of wine, he only has a half a cup. And so I look at creativity and the place where you're coming from as an opportunity to learn about yourself. And if we're going to create a really powerful creative renaissance in the world today and begin to understand the power and the purpose of creativity, we then get to change our lives and be stewards for change in the place where people are suffering and open up doors to allow them to invite us in to be able to assist and love and care for them in some way.
Yeah. Beautiful. Yeah, I'm so appreciative of all that you're talking about. It's so yeah, the concept of creativity as being more than just like an isolated act or a product. It's throughout all of our relationships. And also, I'd love to just explore how we are also creating constantly inside of ourselves, like our own, you know, our how we look at the world, we are creating constantly. And it
Mm.
changes over time, maybe, or maybe it doesn't. There's so many things that can happen, but that is also, I think, something that we don't really talk about very much, or, people have maybe not they're not encouraged to think about their every sort of moment of their existence as being a creative act, and how powerful it is. So I wonder if you could just, what are your thoughts about that?
The something as simple as brushing your teeth, right, is a creative act, right? And I think part of this thing that comes up for me as we're in this conversation is how well or how much do you value each creative act each day, right? Like even driving to work is a creative act. Um, Going to the gym to work on your body, going to a breathwork class, going to a painting class, like everything that you're doing every day is a creative act. Like when we look at traditional Chinese medicine, or we look at the Asian arts, whether it's Tai Chi, Qigong, Kung Fu, Taoism, um, what we find is, this essential understanding of elements. And creativity is part of the element of fire, right? And so fire has the ability to deconstruct or to construct. And so when we look at the sun and the rays that are hitting the surface of Earth and causing all of this growth to occur, whether it's cotton or it's an elm tree or it's a rose or it's a daffodil or the sunlight that is powering our energy systems and all animals, right? And so that warmth, I think about creativity as like this reflection of the sun's warmth and my ability to absorb everyone else's creative pursuits around me. It inspires me to be able to create more, and it helps me understand that I'm part of a collective whole that's bigger than my own individual pursuit, which one brings me warmth and joy and love in my heart, but it also gives me inspiration to think about, well, what could I leave from my life to humanity as an offering, a creative pursuit that I put down on paper, that I put down on video, that I can leave as a legacy to make someone else's journey more enjoyable. Because joy is an element of the heart, right? Passion is an element of the heart. Well, passion's part of creativity, right? It's an intense endeavor. And so I know that when my diet is off, that my sleep is off, and my exercise is off, and my communication is off, I know that I'm less likely to be intensely passionate during the day about whatever I am pursuing, right? So whether it's watching a football game, whether it's sitting down at the piano, whether it's doing my exercise process, whether it's going to the grocery store, I'm going to be less passionately focused about the creative endeavors that move from moment to moment. Like every moment is a creative act. And so I would encourage people to really look at how they're choosing to create and how they're choosing to live their life as a lifestyle, right? Do you have a lifestyle of passionate affair, or do you have a lifestyle of avoidance and depression affair? And if that's the case, the question is, how do you interrupt that depressed state, that avoidant state, so that you can become more engaged in your own reality? And I think it really starts with the word that you said earlier, which is vulnerability and honesty, right? And there's different versions of honesty. And honesty belongs to the element of water, right? And so if the element of water, my honesty with myself is too low, then what's going to happen is my fire is going to get too big and then I'm going to burn out, right?
Mm.
And so the bladder in traditional Chinese medicine and the kidneys are associated with the element of water. The small intestine and the heart are associated with the element of fire. And the kidneys and your heart, they control your blood pressure, right? So your pressure is actually determined by the, the interconnectedness and the balance between the fire in your life, the passion, and the balance, the love, and the humor, right? And so if I can keep a good balance between my fire and my water, and these are both in the emotional world, if I can keep good balance over my emotions, my ability to enter into the world and passionately create and passionately interfere with patterns that are generational, that are no longer serving my bigger vision and my purpose for myself, well, then I have the energy to do so if my lifestyle matches my vision. But when my lifestyle doesn't match my vision, I'm going to either burn out or I'm going to drown underneath the weight of my vision because I don't have enough fire and I don't have enough balance in order to passionately co-create with others and support the vision that I feel is most aligned with my dream.
Mm. Yeah, I really appreciate you bringing in the traditional Chinese medicine, these ancient wisdom traditions that have been informing us. Even many people may not be aware of it, but this wisdom, this knowledge has been with us for so long, and it, it behooves us, I think, to really pay more attention and to give more um give more respect to the fact that the we are elements, like we are all composed of these elements,
Yes.
and that to not really recognize that, to not really honor that, puts us at a great, I mean, disadvantage, obviously, but also it leads us to illness, to disease, to, just not functioning well at
And to
all,
loneliness.
and to loneliness.
And,
Yeah.
and when you feel lonely on a planet where there's 8 billion people and infinitely more animals and amazing opportunities, and you feel lonely, it shows you that there's something going on between your fire and your water, and you need to balance those out in some way. Life is tricky in the sense that um, everyone is given a different distribution of elements based on when they're born. Like if you look into Chinese astrology and you get deep into that, I think I'm 48% fire. And so I always have to be really mindful to balance myself out. So I'm 48% fire. So of course I live right on the ocean front because I know that I need water, right? And I'm only 3% water, but I'm 0% wood. So the floors in my house are wood, all my tables are wood, all my coffee tables are wood, like everything else in my house is wood because I'm so much fire. And it's so easy for me to burn out and go beyond what my body physiologically, structurally, psychologically, and emotionally can handle. So I actually use the elements to create a very cohesive creative environment for myself.
Mhm.
And understanding these elements gives you a distinct advantage to be able to co create and passionately create the things that you're interested in.
And do you employ these, the elements and your knowledge of traditional Chinese medicine with your clients
Yeah, for
directly?
sure, 1000%. And I've
Yeah.
seen the thing that I love about the Asian arts is they've been around for 10,000 years in their recorded history, right? And so if you look at that, you have to take a half step back and go, oh, they were analyzing and figuring these things out 10,000 years ago in their recorded history. And if that's the case, you have to think about all the time that they spent before that figuring them out before they even decided to record them, right? And so it just allows me to understand that, Asian cultures are thinking cultures, right? And Asian cultures are very energetically sensitive. And so I like to lean in to traditions that have been tested for thousands and thousands of years to produce verifiable, repeatable results. And the beautiful thing about the body is complex, but it's also very simple, meaning that it records an experience that's beyond its capacity to process at a psychological, at an energetic, or at an emotional level. And when that happens, it stores it somewhere in your body as tension or stress. Well, first as stress and then as tension. And if you know where that stress lives and you know where that tension is, the second that you remove that, you create instantaneous permanent change, meaning a successful pattern interrupt that allows you to transcend either some individual distortions or some generational miasms or generational limitations that allow you to now create at a whole nother level that's beyond where any one of your ancestors ever created.
Right. Yeah, yeah. And also I love like you as you've been talking about it's really I think important to bring forth that this is a process of remembering. Like
Yes,
all of this wisdom, has been with us for so long,
so long.
but we've forgotten so much of it. And I mean, yes, of course, some people were not brought up in Asia. It doesn't matter. Like this wisdom has been throughout uh, our existence. And only in the relatively short history, our past history, we have like as a global society, sort of like cut that off and moved toward a hyper rational or hyper materialistic understanding of who and what we are, and much to our detriment, uh, and has and I think that people like you and others who are really leaning into this body of wisdom, um, it's an incredible gift and real beneficial force. So I just want to like underline that, and it's really a process of recalling, remembering, rediscovering inside of us all that there are these deep um, these true techniques and understandings of how we are really meant to meant to function, that we have been really ignoring for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, if you, I like the word that you use, like, global society, right? And, for the first time in history, and because of the advent of the the internet, you know, regardless of your socioeconomic status, you can hop on YouTube and you can get high quality education for free, right? And you got to remember that these techniques that were developed in these different parts of the world a long time ago, they were mostly utilized by people who had means, that had positional leverage, okay, that had education, right? And so, what I love about what's going on in the world is people are starting to understand a concept called epigenetics. And they're looking into the genome, realizing that, oh, the genome is a storehouse of information, right? So our bodies have this inherent wisdom, it's already inside of us. And the techniques, they would never work if the intelligence wasn't on the inside as well, right? There would have to be a mirror outside to inside in order for that to be able to create change, growth, expansion, transformation. So now that we're in this place where we know that the average Joe and the average Jane can get access to quality information, to be able to utilize these ancient wisdom and ancient techniques and ancient, medicinal herbology and people's understanding of the stars and how it affects personality. There's just so much out there that the average human, by the time they're 30 years old, can have the type of analytical, physical, physiological, structural, and emotional and psychological education that was never even possible before.
Yeah.
And so, even, and the reason why that was impossible is because humans were stuck in survival based strategies, right? There were times, and this is recent times, where people went without food for 5 days, right? We can look at what was going on during World War II in Europe, and we can see people were starving, right? And yes, there's an intense amount of convenience, and I'm sure that has its limitations. But at the same time, at least we have access to the information. And we have people like you who are willing to take time out of their day to record information, to bundle it up so that people can have an opportunity to grow beyond their own limitations. And this is a really radical, amazing time. And this is why I'm so excited. We're in the middle of the creative renaissance. Like every day, people, the average individual, the only people that were getting views before were people who were part of the media. Well, now a single mom at home who loves to knit can sit down with her phone and set up a little recording station, and she can teach people about this old Polish knitting technique that's been forgotten and passed down from her great grandmother to her. And she can spread it all over the world, right? And so we're in a creative renaissance. And I think the thing that I hearken back to, it's when we're using things like social media and we're engaging with the public, the question is always asking, where am I creating from? Am I creating from depression? That has its benefits. Am I creating from pain? Am I creating from anger? Am I creating from anxiety? Am I creating from fear? And once you answer that question, you then realize you're at choice to create from where you want to create from. Because you can see if I'm creating from one of those fear based states, I'm only going to propel and propagate more of the pain that I have inside of me. And the beautiful thing that I love about music and art and communication and speaking and poetry is you can take pain and you can transform it into pleasure
Mm. Yeah.
through and in this creative renaissance. And so everyone who's listening, look at your life, take a good assessment of yourself, sit in a mirror and just ask yourself, is there one person that I can create something for today that may be in pain that I might be able to help them transform that pain into pleasure? And if that's the case, then get out your phone, record something and put it out there for someone to get access to, because we all need each other. This collective whole. We're all connected. Like there's a collective mind, there's a collective soul, there's a collective body. We're all growing together, and we either go together or we never go at all. And so everyone has a fiduciary responsibility to be mindful of what they're creating and to create every day. You can create compliments. You can create a calendar of and every day there's an amazing compliment in that calendar that you give to somebody, to a total stranger, right? There's just like we can make up whatever we want to make up. And do we want to create towards love or do we want to create towards fear?
Right. Right. And so much of that is like knowing and really taking seriously like that we are all together and we're never separated, really. I
Yeah.
mean, even though the society says that, oh no, you're by yourself, you're isolated, all this fragmentation. But no, the truth is that we're all a collective together all the time. And we always have choice. There's always a moment of choice. And again, that's counter to the messaging from the mainstream, dominant forces, but we always have the choice and we're always together. So, yeah. Um I would love to know for you, is there a practice that you can recommend to anybody who's tuning into this today that can make a difference in their lives?
Yeah, yeah, 1000%. The thing about the emotional creativity, artistry, it lives in the emotional world. And the emotional world is accessed through the breath. And so, what I think would be really, really beneficial is for people to focus in on a process called the six healing sounds. Okay. And there's a particular breath for every single organ that will de-stress you, right? That will take the negative energy that's circulating through that organ and transmute it into positive energy, into good flow. Because when we're in positive flow, it's easy to co create with others and it's easy to get into a passionate, creative affair. Okay. When our energy is stagnant, meaning it's stuck, and it's negative, it's very difficult to create something that's filled with inspiration and love. It's very easy to create something that's filled with frustration, agitation, fear, and pain. And so the six healing sounds, might take you 3 minutes to get through them. If you did that every day for 28 days, I promise you, you will have more light, more love, more laughter, more joy, more creativity and freedom in your life. And you'll have much more peace. And so I spoke earlier the place where you create from. I think creating from peace, well, magnifies more peace, right? Creating from happiness magnifies more happiness. Creating from passion ignites more passion. Creating from power ignites more power. And so find the six healing sound that you're most attracted to. And the sounds are the sound of a snake, which is S S S S S, WHOOO, which is the sound of the spleen, okay, and the pancreas, and then the sound of the heart, which is HAW, and you open your mouth nice and wide as you can, and you stick out your tongue and you go, and that allows you to disperse the excessive heat collecting in your heart. And then you make the sound of the kidney, so heart, then kidney, which is water. You make the sound of CHEW, it sounds like this. And then you go from the kidney over to the pericardium, which is HEEEE. And rather than it being he, it's deep breath in. That disperses the excessive heat in the pericardium. And then you go to the liver, and the liver is the organ for freedom. Okay? And when people have a sense of freedom, it's easy for them to be generous and giving. And the sound for that is SHHHH, as if you're informing someone to and you make them very soft and so vocally. And if you go through each one 9 times, the first one will be you're going to be dispersing all of the excessive heat in the lungs. And it's going to be easy to be more loving. It's going to be easy to move through your grief. And so each one of these sounds affects a different organ, which affects you emotionally and psychologically and energetically. And I think if I was going to do something purposely creative, I would go through my six healing sounds, do each one 9 times. And by the end of that, when you start creating, you're going to be creating from neutrality as opposed to vested interest. And when you're creating from neutrality, you're co-creating with God. When you're creating from vested interest, right, you're creating from emotional inner deficiencies, okay, fears, limiting beliefs, or mental or emotional insecurities. And so I think neutrality is the place to come from when you want to co-create something very profound and unique and beneficial for yourself and every other life that you touch in the world.
Wow, Christopher, that is really so incredibly supportive. I think this is really what a wonderful practice to, for people to start, because this is it's so body based. Obviously, it's like it's the body's intelligence, and your work is true body intelligence. It is
Yeah.
definitely, it is like, we don't have to, it's not about thinking about something. It's not about the story that we have about our problems or anything like that. It's about really tapping into what this vessel that we inhabit, the incredible intelligence that it has, and paying attention to that, and knowing how we can actually, to use this metaphor, how to drive this vehicle in a way that is most beneficial, most flourishing. Yeah.
Yeah,
So
like, tune into what it's capable of. And when you're tuning into the six healing sounds, if you're confused by what I share, get on YouTube and find somebody who will go through that meditation with you. There's a guy out there in the world named Mantak Chia, Mantakchia, and he wrote a book called The Six Healing Sounds. And you can order that book. It's relatively inexpensive, or save the money, get on YouTube, type in his name, Six Healing Sounds, and go through the practice with him. And then there's no money. The only cost is time, energy, and effort. And if you're putting time, energy, and effort into your life, your body's experiencing you as giving it love. And when you love your body then in turn loves your life. And then you end up with really good, amazing, positive experiences that inspire you to want to invest more time, more energy, more effort, and more love into yourself. And that, for me, is the place to create from.
wow, fantastic. Thank you so much, Christopher. We're running out of time, unfortunately. So I would love to ask you, and the one last thing is that I know you have a free gift for our audience, and can you talk about that and who it's
Yeah,
for?
yeah, that's easy. You can email support@yourbodieintelligence.com, and you say, I want to have access to the free gift in the membership portal. And in there are going to be some attunements, which take your body from negative energy states into positive energy states. There's going to be one Bestercise for the large intestine, which will be great. That is going to help you break up the rigidity around your shoulders, your head, your neck, so that you can be more vulnerable and more present and more organized. Um, and then there's transmutative meditations in there that will help you disperse even more negative energy so you can get into a positive state.
Wonderful. That is incredibly generous. Thank you so much. Thank you for spending this time with me. This has been such a rich conversation. I feel like we could go on for a much longer time.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, yeah. So thank you. Really deeply appreciate it. And
You're welcome.
yeah, I look forward to the next time we can talk.
Me too.
Yeah.
Yeah, for
And
everyone out there, listen, all it takes is a little bit of effort. If 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 10 minutes sounds too long, do it for 60 seconds every morning. Find one of those sounds and do it for 60 seconds. And I promise you, the next day, maybe you'll be able to do it for 90 seconds. The next day, maybe 2 minutes. The next week, maybe 3 minutes. As you start to build this cachet of um, of self love and attention and affection for yourself, you're going to reap positive benefits.
yep, it's true. Every step is, it's a practice. It's
Yeah.
like familiarizing ourselves with something new and something that might be kind of unfamiliar, a little bit awkward maybe, but with practice, it all gets better. And yes, yes, we can feel the difference for sure. So,
And you're worthy of loving yourself. You're worthy of self love. That's
yeah,
all you need to know. I am worthy of self love.
yes. Thank you again, Christopher, really. deeply grateful for your work, for spending this time with me. It's been such a
Thank you.
pleasure.
Oh, it's been great.
Yeah.
Have fun, everyone.
Yes. And yes, thank you everyone who's tuning into this interview. I will see you in the next one. And until then, take really good care and be well. Bye for now.